most of the local settlers here on the island were descendants of shipwreck survivors. And that is true in a couple of cases, but not always. And I'm going to give you a good example of that right here. About 8 out of 10 of the families that we have here, living here now, actually came over here during the Tuscarora Indian War, which went from 1698 to 1701 to run the white man off the mainland, and that's exactly what they did. Now, those settlers who were on the mainland had already been trading with the Hatteras Indians over here, who they knew they were friendly. They knew the area had 3 corn crops a year because we have a semi-tropical environment. We also knew that there was plenty of water here, and so they ended up over here beginning about 1698. Now here on our left, these little trees, you see here the little oval leaves, the lime green, I mean right out the window, they're touching the window almost there. That's called Yaupon. We learned from the Indians how to make Yaupon tea, and John Lawson called it the black drink when he was here in April of 1701. It was John Lawson who discovered the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Indians. He said that, I was shocked and amazed to find ye Hatteras Indians with light complexions and gray eyes. And that the Indian king who did the talking, Kinnicky, told Lawson in April of 1701 that our ancestors could talk in a book as the white man does. In other words, they could read. I remember hearing that on a John Wayne movie, years ago when I was a kid, and then later on I found out, my God, whoever did produce that movie knew something about John Lawson's book. But this area is just full of Yaupon. All you had to do was pull these little oval-shaped leaves out, dry them out, chop them up into tea bag, I mean literally into dust, put it in hot water, and you've got a drink. It's very good with milk in it, some kind of cream. It will turn your teeth black, and that's the stigma that went with it. Now I want to point out just one other thing. This is, I come down here at night about dark on my ghost tour. I got 8 different tours that I do. This is the Hobnail Boot Ghost is right here. The gentleman that owns this house, and he's in there right now, and he's told me, he's actually told people on my bus before that it was a February night, it was 1987. His dog King was a German Shepherd, his German Shepherd at that time. It was cold, the wind was out of the northwest, there was not this many houses back in here. He said that King was just going stark raving angry. He said it was not really an alarm bark, it was a fear bark. But I came outside, grabbed him by the collar, and that was the first time that dog was 8 years old at the time. That was the first time he'd ever bitten me, ever done anything other than lick my hand. And about the time I reached down to smack him on the head there, I could hear the sound of boots on a wooden floor walking across my earthen yard here. So we got another fella down here who's heard the Hobnail Boot Ghost as well. His name is Chubby. He drinks a lot of beer, but he says he heard it. I've known him for years. I've got a lot of stories from him that I'm inclined to believe him. I would love to hear that. We've got a couple of ghost stories I do down here. But this is the oldest settled part of the island. There was an Irishman named William Rawlinson who came back. I thought this might be a good shot coming down through here sometime. That's up to you. Irishman named William Rawlinson was listed in the will of 1712 of Francis Farrow, and we know where William Rawlinson's gravesite is, his home site and his gravesite. But we're riding down an old ancient Indian footpath right now that became a colonial horse and cart trail that became a little paved lane here. Here was the school here in Frisco, right here on our left. That was the school teacher there. Her name was Miss Nell Wise Wechter. She wrote lots of children's books, including Kathy of Torpedo Junction, which was a national award winner. Now, right over this mobile home, right on top of the ridge up there, that's the home site of William Rawlinson, dating to 1704, and likely earlier than that. The descendants of William Rawlinson still live down in here today. Show you the home here on our left. This is a very old homestead back in here. Lots of Yaupon. Lots of cedar. This is Atlantic white cedar, what we call juniper. Juniper is a Algonquian Indian word that means swelling wood, and that's exactly what juniper does when you put it in water. They're very old, very slow growing. This home right here was built in 1882. Not on the left, but the two-story part right there. A lot of moss. This is all natural back in here. Gives you that old Savannah, old Charleston feel. But this, in my mind, this place just oozes the history back in here. All sorts of bottles come up in here. Lots of Indian pottery. We didn't have any rocks over here, but we did trade. We found lots of arrow points, and it's because our Indians were trading seafood for arrow points and various rock-style tools from the Indians on the mainland. There, that whole dock there was twisted by Hurricane Emily in 1993. But this is, again, the oldest settled part on the island right here. A lot of these guys like their privacy back in here, but this man gave me a nasty phone call here on our left one time, and I told him his right to have the island to himself did not outweigh our visitors' needs to know something about the island. If he wanted to move here and close the bridge off behind him, he was a little late. So we've got that here. Everybody wants to be the last man in. Here on our left, this is the Cat's Meow. This is the home place of Lillian Braun Jackson. You may know her, writes the Cat's Mysteries that are on and off the New York Times fiction bestseller list. So then we go from the oldest to the new. These are all multi-million-dollar houses in here, anywhere from $750,000 up to about $2 million. They all have docks, swimming pools. This home here on the right, Margaritaville, belonged to the president of Jimmy Buffett Fan Club International. She sold it, but she allowed the name to be kept. There's still some Buffett memorabilia. Jimmy Buffett has been in that house on the right. Nice little swimming pool there. All these homes rent like gangbusters. A lot of people say you're just ruining the island here, ruining the ambiance, the small community feel, and that's true in some extent. But this is our whole economic infrastructure is real estate here. Believe it or not, you can make cleaning these houses, these rental houses, this place here on the left with the hurricane shutters. That's $140 a week every Saturday for cleaning that house. You got two people that have a 2-hour system and can clean that entire house from a week's stay. There's $70 a piece. That's $35 an hour. That's not too bad. You do 5 or 6 of those houses on a Saturday and 5 or 6 on a Sunday, you've made about $1,000. Now you're going to be exhausted Monday morning, but you've got until Saturday or Friday night anyway to rest up and get ready. We literally have people here who make a living cleaning custom homes. This house on the right with the Norwegian sun, that's exactly it. The builder was from Norway. Yeah, all we've done here is made a circle. Okay, let's go over and see what the beach used to look like before our dunes were built. Did I hear an arg back there?
She heard an arg. She said, "Go on."
Here's some persimmons right here. The Indians ate these. They're just ripening up. They're actually now when they're hard, they're very, very bitter. But when they're mushy, they're pretty doggone good. Has a taste somewhat reminiscent of pumpkins. Now when they did the home site on this house on the left here, they found a whole bunch of pottery shards and some stone stuff. Anytime you find a stone here, it's either a ballast stone, number one, from after settlement began here, early 1700s, or it's something that the Indians traded for. Now Carl's got some stuff in there he's found on his property, here in his museum here on the right. Okay, this on our left, this is called the Great Ridge. There are 6 ridges that parallel each other running down the south center of the island. This is the highest. I'm going to show you the highest point on the island back in here. But our real purpose for coming down here is I would like to show you how the Barrier Island beach system looked before the man-made engineering arrived here in 1934. These dunes that you have on the ocean front were man-made, built during the Depression by the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. Here's our airstrip over here. They've got those porta-johns in there now. I guess we'll have to go with Frisco International. Here's where we get all our weather right here on the right. That's the NOAA. Everything you read on the Weather Channel about conditions at Cape Hatteras comes from that computer-generated site. Okay, now this, if you could remove here on our right, as we ride up here about the next half mile to a mile, if you could remove all these trees, if you could throw in some cattle, some horses, some wild banker ponies, goats, hogs, sheep, all this livestock roamed free on the island, and they ate down all the vegetation. It was natural forage. But this is the way things used to look here. It was not flat beach, but it was these various hills that we have in here. This is a genuine barrier island ecosystem that has been untampered by man. You may have heard this area referred to as the graveyard of the Atlantic. That name comes from Alexander Hamilton, the guy on our $10 bill today. In 1752, he was a 17-year-old teenager, passenger on a vessel called the Thunderbolt, making her way from St. Kitts to New York City. Off of Diamond Shoals, which we're going to take a look at here in a minute, she encountered trouble when the captain mistook his reed on the inner channel to negotiate Diamond Shoals. The Thunderbolt scraped bottom. Unbeknownst to the cook, coals fell out of the galley stove and got down in the crevices of the ship. 4 hours later, they had a raging fire on board. Hamilton never forgot it, and in 1792, as Secretary of the Treasury, he stood before Congress, originating the act to create American lighthouses. He was the father of that bill. He's the reason we have lighthouses in this country. But he said the area around the Cape of Hatteras is much in need of a lighthouse from the bones of the many ships that line her treacherous shores. So that's where your term graveyard emanates from. Here's the highest point on the island up there on the left, 41 feet above sea level. We call it Mount Frisco. We'll be heading up on that ridge here in just a few minutes. You get short of breath or your ears start popping, it's that 40-foot altitude. Yeah, this is a federal campground. We like to beat up on the Park Service a lot, but you got to hand it to the Park Service. They were able to construct a campground in here and not alter the natural landscape.
I like the car.
One of the earliest maps of Cape Hatteras, done in 1795 by an English cartographer named Jonathan Thrice, listed 3 remarkable sand hills here, is how he referred to him on his map notes. And it was a mini Jockey Ridge, just like you have there in Nag's Head, that huge sand system. Well, what happened over a 300-year period there, 200-year period, is that the northeast winds that constantly blow in here, coming right straight at us in this windshield here, and the natural foraging of literally thousands of pieces of livestock allowed a big windstorm in 1882 to blow down all of these sand hills into just the flat expanse of sand that we've got. But again, this is a natural barrier island ecosystem, and I salute the Park Service for being able to come in here with a bulldozer and a drag line, create this area, and not even really alter the landscape of any consequence. Now we'll get up on top of the ridge up here at some point and get a really good view.
So is this, nobody can build anything else on here, right?
This is correct. Yep, 82% of Cape Hatteras Island is a federal park. Now, there's no electricity and no hot water. They do have some solar panels, but you better have that. If you like warm water, you better have that shower taken by 6 o'clock in the evening. But they still get $22 a night. I never get tired of riding through here. To me, this is just absolutely stunning. Real beautiful. Just think about how much better it would be if it didn't have a campground in it. Okay, we'll be making our way up the Great Ridge now. Okay, we learned how to make wine from the Indians, scuppernongs. Here is a scuppernong grapevine, just part of it there on the left. When I was a kid, you guys, I mean, you literally, this campground was opened in 1967, but these little, we'll see little vestiges of them here. These scuppernong leaves here, that thing's not strong enough to produce grapes, but they were all over the place through here. And I don't know if you ever had scuppernong on your way out of town. If you want to stop at Native Vine once you cross over the Currituck Bridge, he's got about 8 different local North Carolina wines, and we learned so much from the Native Americans. We really did. Okay, on our left you'll get some good views of the ocean. The clouds, you'll see that there's no real clouds on our left up in the air until you get out on top of the ocean. That's the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is 84 degrees year-round. That's what gives that water that blue tint. It's the Gulf Stream, because the water is generally warmer than the air. As a result, you have steam clouds. If you could look at these clouds with time-lapse photography, it would really look like cotton balls constantly changing. Especially this area right in here. I mean, it was just overrun with scuppernongs. And as a matter of fact, when John White did his drawings, see, the Indian Manteo was a Hatteras Indian. The Indian Manteo would have been on these ridges up here because there was so high they could see. Can you imagine being a Native American in November of 1492, standing up here on this ridge, up here on the sea beach, doing whatever it is you were doing, looking for deer, looking for bear, whatever, small bird hunting or whatever, and looking out over the ocean and seeing Christopher Columbus make his way for the Diamond Shoals up here. Our Indians, our Native Americans here, were the first to know that there was somebody else out there. And the very first contact between the Native Americans and white European settlers occurred here in January of 1524 when Verrazano traded with our Indians here for fresh water as he began the last leg of his journey back to Europe.
Did you get a spot? Can I stop, get a pan shot?
Yep. See, Doc, see the very tip of Cape Hatteras over there?
Right.
All right, now see the white water on top. I've got some binoculars here if y'all want to. Let me get off the road a little bit low here. But this is a great vantage point for our Native Americans. They could see ships coming out of sight and then appearing right on the edge of the tip here because there is a channel, a very deep channel, about anywhere from 80 to 125 feet, that runs only about a mile. You can actually see the break in it. If you look over top of that trailer, you'll see some white breakers on your left. Then you'll see some white breakers on your right. See the deep water that runs through the middle there? It was Christopher Columbus that discovered that right over top of that trailer on our left. Columbus left it. Thank goodness he left meticulous notes, but in his notes he wrote that he saw a pod of porpoises. What they call, actually, dolphin is a Spanish name, and because of these whales, dolphins, and porpoise and stuff, they didn't like getting up on that shallow shoal water, 5, 6, 7 foot shoal water, because like anybody else, these mammals have soft undersides, but they would go through the deep water. So here's Columbus anchored, wondering how he's going to negotiate that shoal section there when he sees these pod of porpoises and dolphins swim by. And he followed them right on through the deep water, therefore saved himself as much as a day's sail to the outside, out in the open ocean, to get around those treacherous shoals. Well, guys, you got about 20 minutes of a 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour. But on our schedules, that's the best we're gonna be able to do.
Oh, it's amazing.
You know, you guys just plan your family vacation down here next year, and we'll get I mean, we didn't even get to Hatteras Village. You didn't even get the local side of the lighthouse. You didn't. You got one of 6 ghost stories that I do, and I just blew through that hobnail boot ghost story there. We actually have a clue about the origin of that. We do know that there was a hanging down in that neighborhood in 1822. A man named Absalom Scarborough was a livestocker, and the Pointer family, P-O-I-N-E-R. We pronounce it Pointer, but in the old island vernacular, just like Smith's Island and Wallops Island and Tangier Island, all there in the Chesapeake, they have their own little vernacular. And Pointer in the old days was pronounced Piney. There's like, you know, Tom Piney, Albert Piney, but it's still Pointer, P-O-I-N-E-R. But the 2 Pointer boys had been rustling Scarborough's cattle and other animals as well, and he caught one of the Pointer boys' wife with sheep there on a loom making up, and he found the carcass. The carcass did indeed have his mark on it, and in a fit of rage, he strangled one of those 2 boys. The other boy got away and witnessed it. Absalom was convicted by a jury here in what was then called Hyde County, and it was just pure convenience that 4 of the 6 jurors were related to the Pointers. So by 4 to 2, he was sentenced to hang, and he was hung in that neighborhood. So even though they call it the hobnail boot ghost, there's some basis for the fact that perhaps it's the ghost of Absalom Scarborough looking for his sheep carcasses.
We're more than just a beautiful beach here. The history we have on the Outer Banks of North Carolina is compelling, to say the least. We have all sorts of maritime history. We have history with our Native Americans. The very first contact between white European settlers and Native Americans occurred here. We are the site of the very first flight. We have the first official weather station ever constructed. The United States Weather Bureau office constructed the very first station here on Hatteras Island. This was the initial victory here by the Union Army, the very first victory, indeed the very first victory of any kind by the Union Army during the Civil War occurred here August 29, 1861, with the Battle of Hatteras Inlet. It was the largest naval bombardment known to mankind up until that time, when the entire Union fleet appeared off of Hatteras Inlet and bombarded Fort Hatteras for 4.5 hours. It's estimated by Civil War historians that every 4 seconds, anything from 12-pound grape shot cannonballs to 100-pound Dahlgren shells exploded in and around the fort. This was also the first engagement in the Civil War featuring African Americans. The very first freedmen's colony was right here on Hatteras Island, set up by the Union soldiers for slaves who escaped over from the mainland seeking safe haven over on the Outer Banks.
Okay, so that will be a section, and we go back to Sam Onset and talk a little bit with her, or go to one of the parts of the tour. Okay, now come back, and now we're having like a second segment, some other topic, and action.
We have a lot of history here that deals also with geology. The Outer Banks was formed 17,000 years ago during the 4th and final ice age, what coastal geologists call today the Pleistocene era. We had woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers roaming the coastal plain here. Now, as you know, during the ice age, the world's oceans froze. Here on our side, here in the mid-Atlantic, the Atlantic Ocean froze. All that ocean water gathered as a solid ice mass at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. As that ice retreated over a 2,500 year period, it pulled on the trailing edge all this glacial action, these finely crushed sands and sediments. And once those sands and sediments settled in to the Atlantic Basin right out here on our left, they left behind these huge, vast geologic sand deposits that we know today as the Outer Banks.
Wow. Okay, now I have 2 minutes left, so just roll on for a few minutes on anything, and then I'm going to change the tape. Okay, and action.
The Cape Hatteras National Seashore, in addition to be a rising star in coastal resorts here on the United States, also has some fantastic wildlife refuges, lots of kayaking, lots of hiking. We have the Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge, which is the crown jewel of wildfowl refuges here in the United States. It's a little known but very true fact that the Cape Hatteras National Seashore is the only national park in the United States that has a substantial amount of private property within it. Fortunately, the 72-mile length of the Cape Hatteras National Seashore, featuring Hatteras and Ocracoke Islands, 65% of these two islands belong to the federal government. You have roughly 10% that belongs to the state of North Carolina and the county of Dare, and about 8% of what is just flat out wetlands. That only leaves about 17% of the Cape Hatteras National Seashore that is open for development. It is a fantastic balance. We have many things to offer our vacationers, but we also have a lot of the modern luxuries that people who want to come enjoy a first-rate, great quality of life vacation can enjoy here, thanks to the fact that we have been able to balance conservation and development.
Now, you don't have a problem to talk about Midget Realty, or should we not? Because
Yeah,
there's
let's talk about them. Absolutely.
Okay, all right, and action.
Midget Realty is owned by the Midget family. That is Midgett. The Midget family has been on the Outer Banks since the recorded history here. The Midget family can trace their ancestry back to 1704 to a French Huguenot, a French Protestant, by the name of Mathieu Midget. He was here with his family. He had many children, and his descendants are still here today. The Cape Hatteras National Seashore here on Hatteras and Ocracoke Islands, we are so very proud of the fact that the names that were here 350 years ago are the very same names that are here today. Time marches on, but the Outer Banks and the Outer Bankers are here with it.